Okay, today we're doing Module 3, Lesson 12, and the objective is to subtract fractions greater than or equal to 1. And we're going to be using the same strategies that we've used for adding fractions, okay? Now, I'm going to be showing you two different methods because people like to learn them differently. And, I don't expect you to master both of them. I expect you to find the one as a good mathematician that is best for you, okay? And you use that method. So let's get started. Now, once again, we're doing MAFS 5, NF11, which is add and subtract fractions with unlike denominators. And it includes mixed numbers, and that's what we're working with on this time. Okay. Now, one thing we always got to worry about when we're talking about adding, subtracting fractions are word problems. That's why I always put MAFS 5, NF12 in there, because that standard is basically the same thing, add and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, including mixed numbers, but it's also applying it to real world situations, which they put them in word problems. Okay. Now, the essential question, what strategies can I use to subtract fractions greater than or equal to 1? So the two strategies I'm going to show you, I want you to pick one of them that you really like. Okay. All right, here we go. All right. So I'm going to show you two different strategies. The first one is going to be subtracting from the whole. And the second strategy is using fractions greater than 1. Okay? So let's start with a subtraction from the whole. I'm going to rewrite this. I know this is 1 plus 1/2 minus 1/6. Now I'm going to rewrite this. I'm going to subtract from the whole. So I got 1 minus 1/6 plus 1/2. And when I subtract from the whole, I know that ends up being 5/6 plus 1/2. So now we've got two fractions that we're going to add together. Now, if I'm going to define equivalent fractions in the 12ths, I could take 5/6 times something equals 12ths. And I can see that I have to multiply by 2, and we have to multiply the top by 2, because we want to be multiplying by 1 to get equivalent fraction. So that becomes 10/12ths. Our 1/2 times something equals 12ths. And we know we'd have to multiply 2 times 6, so the top has to be 6. So it'll be 6/12ths. Now, let me show you what this looks like up here, now that we've already done equivalent fractions, okay? A little more efficient way of doing it is saying, okay, well, I know I'm going to get a common denominator 12. That's because we're going to be multiplying 6 times 2. So that gives me 12. Now, I'm going to deal with a 5/6. I know I multiplied the 6 by 2. So I'd have to multiply the 5 by 2. So look at this. Here's the numerator, and I'm multiplying it by the opposite fractions denominator. 5 times 2 is 10. Now we're going to add, and we're coming over to the other numerator. It's 1. We know we multiplied 2 times 6, so we're going to multiply 1 times 6. Get 6. And that gives us 16/12ths. Now 16/12ths is a fraction greater than 1, and we're going to change this back to a mixed number. And we do that by seeing how many times 12 will go into 16. Well, I can see 12 will go into 16 one time. And I can see that because 12/12ths plus 4/12ths would equal 16/12ths. So 12 goes into 16 one time, and there's 4 left over, so it'd be 4/12ths. So that there is the first strategy. Now our second strategy, what we're going to do is we got 1 and 1/2 minus 1/6. Now instead of subtracting from the whole on this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this mixed number into a fraction greater than 1. And I know that 1 in halves is going to be 2 halves. And I'm going to add that to 1/2. And we're going to subtract that from 1/6. So this ends up being 3 halves minus 1/6. Now, once again, this time, we're still going to multiply 2 times 6 to get a common denominator. And then we're taking the 3 times 6, which gives us 18. We're subtracting this time. So make sure you put the subtraction in there. And we're going to take the other numerator, 1 times 2. And we'll get 16/12ths. And once again, we know 16/12ths 12 goes into 16 one time with 4 left over, so it's 4/12. So there's the two strategies we're going to be working with. So go ahead and watch both strategies as we go through here and copy the models down. But remember, I'm really wanting you to find the one that's best for you. All right, let's try it again. Method 1. So let's start again. We're going to rewrite it. We got 1 plus 3/4 minus 6/7. And we're going to subtract from the whole, so it's 1 minus 6/7. Then we'll add the 3/4 back in. And we know 1 minus 6/7 is 1/7 plus 3/4. Now we know the common denominator is going to be 7 times 4 is 28. And since I had to multiply my 7 times 4, I got to multiply the 1 times 4, and that's going to give me 4. Plus, I had to multiply the 4 times 7 to get 28, so 3 times 7 is going to be 21. And that's going to give us 25/28. Okay, so let's try our second method. In our second method, we have 1 3/4 minus 6/7. Now remember, this 1 3/4 is going to be 4/4 plus 3/4 minus 6/7, which gives us 7/4 minus 6/7. Once again, now we can come over here and we go 4 times 7 is 28. And now we multiply the 4 by 7, so we have to multiply 7 times 7, which would be 49. Now, on the second fraction, we have 4 times 7 is 28, so 4 times 6 is going to be 24. Now we have 49 minus 24, which is going to give us 25/28. All right, here's our next one. Okay, so let's try our first method again. Remember, I've got 3 plus 1/4 minus 2 1/2. Now remember, I'm subtracting a whole 2 1/2, so I'm going to write it as 3 minus 2 1/2. Then I'll add the quarter back in. So we're going to do this one first, because 3 minus 2 1/2 we know is 1/2 plus 1/4. Now to find a common denominator, we know we go 2 times 4, which gives us 8. And I had to multiply the 2 by 4, so I can multiply the 1 by 4, so it's going to give us 4/8 plus, because we're adding. And I had to multiply the 4 by 2 to get 8, so I had to multiply the 1 by 2 and get 2. So that gives us 6/8. Now that's a good answer. But some of you have been working on iReady, you're saying, Mr. Maxwell, I'm not getting the answer. Okay, that's because they're reducing to simplest terms, and that's not part of our standard, but it is your standard to be able to find equivalent fractions. And we haven't got that far yet, but you remember 4th grade you did equivalent fractions. Well, in 5th grade, I want you to use the algebraic way of finding them. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. We have 6/8. And what I want to do is I want to find a common factor between them. And I can see they're both even, so I automatically know they both have a factor of 2. Then I know 2 times 3 equals 6, and 2 times 4 equals 8. Now, like I've shown before, if I'm multiplying by 2, and fractions are another way of showing division, so I'm actually dividing by 2 also, they cancel each other out. So now I can see that 6/8 is actually equal to 3/4. All right, now let's try the fractions greater than 1 strategy. Once we have here, we have 3 1/4 minus 2 1/2. Now I can draw this out where I have 4/4 plus 4/4 plus 4/4, because that's 3 wholes, plus 1/4. And I'm going to add all those together, and I'm going to subtract it from 2 1/2, which is 2 halves, plus 2 halves, plus 1/2. When I add all this together, I can see I got 4, 8, 12, 13/4 minus 2, 4, 5 halves. Now, before we solve this, let's see if we could have done this a little easier. If you notice how I split this up, it was basically 4 fourths times 3. So if I come back up to here, to my actual, if I take my whole number 3 and I multiply that by the denominator 4, I get 12. And I add in my numerator, I get 13 fourths. Notice that's what we have here. Once again, whole number times denominator, which is 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Add the numerator, which is the 1/4, gives us 13 fourths. Now let's try this in the seconds. I'm going to take my whole number and I'm going to multiply it times the denominator. So 2 times 2 is 4. Add the 1 on top for the numerator, and that'd be 5. So 5 halves. Interesting. All right. Now we have to go on through, and we know 4 times 2 is going to give us 8 for our common denominator. Now, I had to multiply 4 by this 4 here by 2 to get 8. So I'd have to multiply 13 by 2. So I'm going to get 26. We're subtracting this time. Now, the 2 here I had to multiply by 4 to get 8. So I have to multiply to 5 times 4, and I'm going to get 20. And 26 minus 20 is 6/8. And we can see that's the same thing we have over here before we reduced it to 3/4. All right. Remember, anytime you want to, you stop these, you try them beforehand. But let me keep going. Here's 4 1/2. So I'm actually writing 4 plus 1/2 minus 3 2/3. Notice when I'm subtracting, I'm not breaking that back. No. And when we added, we didn't break them up either because we could add it to the whole real easy. Same thing with subtracting, because now I'm going to rewrite this as 4 minus 3 2/3 plus the half are going to add back in. Now we can subtract that 3 2/3 from 4, and we end up with 1/3 plus 1/2, which equals 3 times 2 is 6. And we had to multiply the 3 by 2, so I had to multiply 1 by 2, so we end up with 2. Plus, I had to multiply the 2 by 3 to get 6, so I have to multiply the 1 by 3, and I get 3/6 for the half. When I add them together, we got 5/6. Now, I know this is in lowest form just because the numerator and denominator are only 1 away from each other. So the only common factor they both have is 1. Now let's go to the fractions greater than 1. Now here's 4 1/2 minus 3 2/3. Try to convert them over to fractions greater than 1 by yourself for a second. Okay. All right. Now remember, I could take this 4 and I could split it up to 2 halves plus 2 halves plus 2 halves plus 2 halves. And that'd be 8 halves. Plus the 1/2 would be 9 halves. Now, the quicker way to do it is I'm going to do the 4 times 2, which is 8, plus the 1 up top, gives me 9 halves. Minus, and here I'm going to go 3 times 3, which is 9. Add the numerator, 2 would be 11/3. Now, we're finding a common denominator, so we're multiplying the 2 and 3 to get 6. Now, I had to multiply this 2 here by 3 to get 6. So I'm going to multiply the 9 by 6. Excuse me, 9 by 3. So 9 times 3 is 27. Now we're subtracting. So now I'm coming over, and I had to multiply the 3 times 2 to get 6. So I'm going to multiply the 11 by 2. It would be 22. When we subtract these, we'll end up with 5/6, exact same answer. All right, well, there's our 2 strategies, same strategies we've been working with. I hope it's getting a little easier for you. And now that we finish up this one, we will be heading into where we're going to be reducing fractions, adding 3 fractions, and subtracting 3 fractions. Okay? All right, see you at school.